Hi, I'm Paige. Today, I'm going to talk about the hot potato of the Republic of Korea, the U.S. Forces Korea. It is the U.S. military that has been stationed in the Republic of Korea since the armistice of the Korean War in 1953. They aim to defend the Republic of Korea from North Korean threats and to keep China and Russia in check. The USFK has increased efficiency by integrating the U.S. troops scattered on the Korean peninsula into the U.S. base in Pyeongtaek since the 2004 Korea-U.S. Agreement, the largest U.S. military base in the world outside of the U.S. mainland. The USFK has always been a hot potato in Korea. However, the issue of national security has become hotter than ever due to the rapidly changing international situation in recent years and the upcoming Korea-U.S. summit. Among them, the USFK has more debates than any other topic regarding national security. Recently, Korea signed a tariff negotiation with the United States. However, unlike Japan and the EU, which resolved the issue of defense costs in the tariff negotiations, Korea only agreed on the matters of tariffs and investment. This means that Korea still has issues with defense costs and the U.S. Forces Korea. It solved the tariffs issue, but it is facing national security issues without a moment to breathe. It's like out of the frying pan into the fire. Security is set to make major changes not only in Korea but also in the rapidly changing international situation. In fact, Elbridge Colby, the U.S. Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, recently expressed the need to modernize the alliance, and a senior South Korean government official said that the role of the U.S. Forces Korea may change depending on factors such as international circumstances, technological changes, and the rise of China. As the U.S. Forces Korea have played a role in protecting South Korea from North Korea so far, it is considered unusual for South Korea to mention the possibility of such a change. As such, the U.S. Forces Korea is facing a big change. So why is the USFK a hot potato for Korea without cooling down for a long time? There has long been a debate over whether the USFK should remain in South Korea. However, the answer to this question has always been a question mark rather than an exact period. In the meantime, it is time to think again about the answer to this question as the United States has come up with a number of changing positions on USFK. In fact, the SCM's announcement at the 2020 South Korea-US Security Consultative Meeting excluded the previously included mention of maintaining US troops in South Korea. And the US began to introduce the concept of strategic flexibility during this period. In addition, according to a report by SSI, a strategic research institute affiliated with the U.S. Army War College, it was determined that the more widely distributed deployment rather than the concentrated deployment of U.S. troops in a specific number of bases is more sustainable, resilient, and helpful for conducting operations abroad in the current international situation, which is within the range of Chinese conventional ballistic and cruise missiles. In response, Park Wongan, professor of international regional studies at Handong University, stated that the USFK currently stationed in Korea appears to want to move outside of the Korean peninsula when necessary to serve in India and the Pacific region as well as to defend the Korean peninsula. As the purpose of the USFK is no longer limited to the security of the Korean peninsula, but there is a possibility that it will expand its role to India and the Pacific, including the Taiwan Strait. It will be important to consider the extent to which Korea will join the United States in the name of modernizing the Korea-US alliance and the possibility of a balanced diplomacy strategy between China and the United States. As you can see from the previous statement, if the U.S. Forces Korea are protecting the Republic of Korea and have the ability to play a significant role in India and the Pacific Ocean afterward, what do other countries think about U.S. Forces Korea? For the United States, the Korean peninsula serves as a strategic location for the Asia-Pacific region because it is located at the intersection of the four major powers, the United States, Japan, Russia, and China. The USFK base on the Korean peninsula serves as a crucial link between strategic bases on the mainland of the United States and the strategic front, but it will also play a crucial role in the rapid projection of military capabilities in times of crisis and war. In other words, the presence of U.S. troops on the Korean peninsula can strengthen the military presence in the Asia-Pacific region and solidify the foundation of security strategy in the region, which is directly related to the U.S. hegemony issue. China and North Korea, on the other hand, have very uncomfortable feelings about the U.S. Forces Korea. North Korea accuses the U.S. military of the occupation of South Korea, aimed at dominating Asia. In a 2018 denunciation by the North Central Committee Propaganda Bureau, appealed the need for North Korea to shake off all its struggles to withdraw U.S. troops from South Korea. Furthermore, North Korea consider the U.S. forces Korea as preventing the reunification under communism that North Korea wants, as long as the U.S. military exists on this land. China believes that the expansion of U.S. troops in South Korea will threaten their alleged value as one China policy including Taiwan. The issue of the presence of U.S. troops in Korea, where there are various issues, is sharply opposed by those in favor and against it. Let's begin with a look at opposition of the presence of U.S. troops in Korea. Independent defense is the first reason. It can be said that the ROK U.S. Combined Forces Command, or the U.S. military, currently has the command of operations in a wartime situation. They believe that the Republic of Korea must take over wartime operational control and withdraw the U.S. troops from Korea to provide independent defense. The second issue is defense costs. With the presence of the U.S. forces Korea in the Republic of Korea, Korea is currently paying defense costs to the U.S. The Korea-U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty, signed in 1953, suggested that South Korea only provide land and buildings and that the U.S. should cover all expenses for the stationing, but since then, the Republic of Korea has been paying defense costs since 1991, citing the increased economic power of the Republic of Korea. The contribution, which started at $100 million a year in 1991, is now leading to defense payments that exceed $1 billion. However, as the Trump administration is now demanding higher defense costs, it seems that an increase in defense costs will be inevitable. Opponents of the station believe that if South Korea uses this huge amount of money for its own defense instead of spending it on defense costs, it will make a big step forward in South Korea's defense. Also, they say that investment in the Republic of Korea's military will result in the development of military weapons and the increase of the Republic of Korea's defense capabilities. Third, some view the possibility of a war with North Korea very low. They say they will not go to war because they are aware that a war on the Korean peninsula will pose a significant threat to the North Korean regime and that the military power of North Korea and the South Korea is significantly different. In this case, the benefits of U.S. military presence in South Korea are questioned. The fourth is uncertainty about whether the United States will intervene or not. The ROK-US Mutual Defense Treaty No. 3 stipulates that in the event of an armed attack in the Pacific region, the two countries should act to meet the threat of their own peace and security in accordance with its constitutional processes. At this time, there are views that question the phrase "in accordance with its constitutional processes." Constitutional processes means the United States Congress, which means that the U.S. Congress's approval is required for the intervention. In this regard, if the Republic of Korea is threatened by North Korea, there is a question of whether the United States will intervene in the Republic of Korea even at the risk of a threat to its own mainland. The fifth is the inconvenience caused by the presence of the U.S. military in Korea. Under the SOFA, the South Korea-U.S. Administrative Agreement, U.S. military bases have extraterritorial status. As a result, there are people who are dissatisfied with the lower rate of prosecution or formal referral compared to the crime rate of U.S. forces in South Korea. There is also environmental pollution at U.S. military bases. Albert McFarland, the deputy chief of the U.S. military base in Yongsan, was sentenced to prison in February 2000 for ordering the release of formaldehyde and methanol into the Han River without permission, and land pollution is severe, with oil and heavy metals being detected on land near the U.S. military base in Pyeongtaek, including Camp Humphreys and Ozen Air Base. In addition, the U.S. Forces Korea returning donor site in Ujeongbu City in 2021 was found to have far exceeded the standards set by the Ministry of Environment when the development project was suspended due to soil pollution. Then, on the contrary, what is the position in favor of the U.S. Forces Korea? The first is war deterrence. As the United States is the world's #1 power, if the U.S. military is stationed in South Korea, this fact alone has strong war deterrence. It is true that some view the possibility of war against North Korea as low, but it is also undeniable that since the Korean peninsula is a ceasefire state, war can happen at any time. Second, economic stability. The Korean peninsula is the only divided nation in the world. The fact that the Republic of Korea is a ceasefire state may raise questions about the stability of the Republic of Korea in the international community. If the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Korea raises questions about the security of the Republic of Korea, it will soon cause anxiety, and this instability could collapse the economy of the Republic of Korea due to the high possibility of foreign investors withdrawing the capital invested in the country. The presence of the U.S. forces in South Korea is the most reliable security card and credit guarantee in the Republic of Korea. In addition, South Korea is seen to spend much more on defense than North Korea. However, given that South Korea is currently in a state of ceasefire and there is a risk of war, it is not considered very large, and the ranking of defense spending as a percentage of GDP is not high. This means that because the U.S. forces Korea are currently stationed in South Korea, they were able to choose and focus on areas other than national defense. However, when the U.S. forces in South Korea withdraw, they will have to invest their investments in other areas into defense spending. Third, it guarantees the uncertainty of the ROK-US Mutual Defense Treaty No. 3. As the other side argued, the ROK-US Mutual Defense Treaty No. 3 requires approval from the U.S. Congress for intervention. As a result, there may be doubts about whether the United States will intervene, but if the USFK is present in the Republic of Korea, this uncertainty can be guaranteed. The pro-choice side believes that U.S. will support the Republic of Korea rather than neglect it in the event of an attack on South Korea because the U.S. military unit, which is considered U.S. territory, is located in South Korea. So, how likely is the withdrawal? We believe that there will be various discussions on maintenance, reduction, and role change. However, the withdrawal of U.S. troops from South Korea seems unlikely. American commanders and lawmakers recently said this. U.S. Indo-Pacific Command Admiral Samuel Paparo Jr. said with the loss of the force on the Korean peninsula, there's a higher probability that North Korea, would invade. Inherently, it would reduce our ability to prevail in conflict during a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing at the Capitol in Washington on April 10, 2025. At the same hearing, J. Beer Brunson, commander of the U.S. Forces Korea and the U.S. said to reduce the force becomes problematic. But what we do provide there, sir, is the potential to impose cost in the East Sea to Russia, the potential to impose costs in the West Sea to China, and to continue to deter against North Korea, as it currently stands. Also he said the ROK, South Korea, sits at the heart of Northeast Asia, which remains a critical region among great powers and regional actors. Minister Cho met with Senator Bill Hagerty and Senator Pete Ricketts, chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee's Subcommittee on Asia-Pacific in Seoul on the 2nd of August 2025. Senator Ricketts emphasized in particularly that the U.S. Congress supports maintaining the current level of U.S. forces Korea and the provision of U.S. extended deterrence, highlighting the commitment to robust defense guarantees for Korea. Andy Kim, a Democratic congressman, said, "I will oppose the substantial reduction of U.S. forces in Korea without deep consultation with the U.S. Congress and Korean partners. I still believe there is strong bipartisan support for the presence of U.S. forces in Korea, and what I continue to tell the Trump administration is that the U.S. forces in Korea benefit not only Korea but also the United States, citing that North Korea poses threats not only to Korea but also to the entire Indo-Pacific region and the U.S. at a press conference with Korean media held at the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. on the 28th of May 2025. Various opinions on this. There are some factors that will prevent North Korea from breaking out a war, such as possibility of collapsing their own regime, difference military power between South and North Korea, nuclear umbrella provided from US to South Korea and the dissuasion of neighboring countries such as China or Russia concerned about escalating into World War III. But we always have to keep it in mind that even if it is not easy for North Korea to start a war due to the above factors, the possibility of a war actually occurring. Because today we are witnessing actual wars in areas where we thought war was not imminent.